What is up? I'm Miguel Antonio, and you are listening to the Live and Create podcast. It's where I interview artists and entrepreneurs about what it means to live a great life and create great things. And before we jump into the podcast today, I'd love for you to check out my band, Run With It. Here's a clip from our song, Move On.
So grab your jackets, grab your coats. The sound of our feet now crushing the snow. This bitch of a night gonna give way to the sun. We'll find a trail and we'll build a new home. Whoa. There's nothing to see here. Whoa. There's nothing to see here. Whoa. There's nothing to see here. Whoa. So why don't we just move on?
If you like what you heard, make sure you check us out at Run With It Band, at Run With It Band, everywhere you follow people at, or go to runwithitband.net. It'll take you to all the different links you want to go to, and there'll be a little button you can click for booking information. Now for today's podcast.
The Live and Create podcast.
Diving in, following you online, seeing what you're up to, checking out the album. Obviously, your passion for writing, passion for singing. You got a great voice as well, by the way. I love that.
Thank you.
But it seems like you have a passion for entrepreneurship, which I love as well, and even for fitness and the CrossFit area. But I'd love to start just where did it start for you with this passion for music?
So when I was little, my mom said she heard me singing in the back of the car, the Wheels on the Bus song, and she just knew that I could sing. And so I was in voice lessons by the time I was 5. And then I was singing solos at school every year from kindergarten on. I had an amazing music teacher. Her name was Mrs. Gray, and she was super sweet. I still remember her to this day. I had great music teachers in public school, in elementary school. I played cello and violin, and I was first tier cellist actually in the 5th grade in the city, which was huge for me. And then I instrument hopped for a while. I think it probably is in line with the entrepreneurship side, but I really picked up guitar and taught myself. And then I took drum lessons actually with the drummer that plays with me now, which is really funny because we didn't even put it together, but we ended up, his name is Toby Fairchild, and he plays with Keller Williams and a whole bunch of people. And I was like 14, and I took a couple months of drum lessons when my parents couldn't hack the kit. So then I got it. So I pretty much just played piano and guitar. And then in school, I had some challenges in deciding what I wanted to do. Well, not like big challenges, but I got into George Mason's, William and Mary's program for business. And then I didn't want to stay in business, and I shifted and started to do more music. And I went to George Mason and I studied in vocal performance. So I studied opera there and then business. And I ended up getting like half of my music degree and then finishing my business degree because I was just done with the whole school thing and paying money for that anymore. I was like, and I dropped out of the music program and started my first rock band. So there you go. So
Oh, yeah. I love it. Well, it's funny you said studying opera because I studied voice in school as well. And I went through like professor after professor for my vocal professor, and just had issues with each one. I'm sure it had to do with me as well and my immaturity. But my final professor, and I was studying opera, and he finally just told me, he's like, I won't teach you unless you quit your rock band for 2 years. And I said, I'm not doing that. And he said, I'll give you a week to think about it, and you come back and you tell me your answer. And I came back as like, I'll do whatever you want me to, but I'm not quitting my rock band. And he took me on. We ended up working for 2 years together, but man, invaluable, the lessons from the opera stuff that I got in there. What did you purposely go there to learn opera? Was there also a passion for opera? Because frankly, I didn't have a passion for opera. I just wanted the techniques.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I think the classical arts are a great foundation to pretty much all things music, and even history and writing and in business too.
Right.
But I was very torn because I studied opera through school, and that's what I had that voice, right? And but I'll tell you that singing the same songs alongside everyone else over and over again is really monotonous. And when you're a creative mind person or entrepreneur mindset, right? Like I just got bored. And the culture was not super inviting, right? So I couldn't see an end game in what I was putting all of this time into, and they ran you ragged. Like, when in business school, I was taking 4 to 5 classes, 3 credits. I was in music school, you're taking 8 classes. Classes were like 1 credit all your time.
1 credit hour, and it was your busiest class. It was insane.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm paying for this, and I don't know what my end game is going to be. And then, of course, there's favoritism, and there's, all these things at play. I was like, this is not how, if I'm going to play favoritism, which we could talk about that in the music industry, it's what I want to do. You have to go down that path, I think. And I think that's a great title for this episode. Don't quit your rock band. Like,
don't quit your rock band. That is a great title. It was so funny. He ended up kicking me out of the studio one day though, because we had like show after show, and I came in, my voice was gone. And he tried to do some runs, and he just stopped like into like 2 minutes. He goes, "Don't ever come back here with your voice sounding like." I was like scared to death to come back. At the time I was pretty young. Now it'd probably be just like, "Fuck you, dude." But I'm glad I wasn't like that, because I did learn a ton, and now I can sing, for 3-4 hour shows a night and not lose my voice, and actually continue to do this and do podcasts and everything. What was it tough for you to connect the opera to the rock and to the country world, or do you call it Americana or country? What genre you're in?
It's all roots music for me,
Roots. Okay.
right? Like, I'll answer the first part of the question. I don't have a difficult time vacillating between different vocal styles. That's probably one of my strengths. And this is not like a brag point. This is coming from classical training. I have an exhaustive range for over 4 octaves now. That didn't happen until my 30s, which, that is a thing about opera and vocal development.
We only get better, which is great. As long as you take care of your voice.
Yes, exactly. And there are ways to do rock that don't kill your voice. And vocal rest has been key. A lot of water has been key. And actually understanding the process. The things that made me a better singer, the more focused on what I wanted to do, the better I got everywhere. Does that make sense? And then when I was teaching, it got better. So I would have all these students with different vocal styles and talents. And I always said, like, tone deaf is like this much of a person. Statistically, there are very few people who are actually tone deaf. You have a voice. If this is what you want to do, you're going to either learn how to take a voice lesson, you're going to learn more about music, you're going to learn more about how to manage your body. And so I just ended up going through singing the blues, because I went through a divorce early in my 20s, and I just kind of fell in from rock into the blues. It's where I was able to write songs. And there were some harsh nights where my voice got fried, and then you push through and you learn how to do it better, and then now I don't remember the last time my voice was tired. And I'm talking like, 10, 12-day tours with 15 gigs in them.
That's awesome.
You just figure it out. And did that happen for you?
For me, it was learning the technique. Basically, we stripped my voice down. The way he described it is like, we're going to strip you down to like the full core, because he's like, you have so many bad habits, I don't even know where to start. And then help rebuild the technique. I would say the only thing was, like, I've almost had to teach myself a new way of doing some things, because now some of the gigs we've done are like 3-4 hours long, and then you have to sing the next day, and then you're writing the next day, and doing those kind of things, where I've actually taken the Taylor Swift method of like practicing on a treadmill from time to time, depending on when I'm in, and mainly just for the breath control. And seeing how important your breath control and your diaphragm is, like in singing throughout the night and protecting your voice and sounding good, and giving you that edge.
I think the really cool point of that too is because it's involuntary breathing, that when you really learn it and you get in, and tying it to the fitness element, the 1,000 to 10,000 rule, which is pretty much applicable everywhere, it becomes innate, right?
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem singing without shoes on too. I prefer that. So I always found like a balance in that. So I could always reach in and bring power or not power, because sometimes it takes as much control to bring it back in.
Be light, yeah.
The diaphragm is an involuntary muscle, so the stronger you get physically, the better singer you become. Mm-hmm. I also believe, Absolutely. Especially if you're a rock singer, any kind of singer, really. In the physics, when I break it down to students, and I'm sure, do you teach?
I did. I taught for 6 years, and it was long enough where I realized I was not a teacher. I had a good friend who had a studio right next to me, and he was brilliant. And when I would come to him for like advice all the time, and finally I was like, you know what? I'm not a teacher. I just am not good at it. But I definitely did my stint. That's for sure.
Okay. So I taught for over 10 years, and I take students here and there depending on their interests and our compatibility, because that does matter. But I really enjoyed learning how to teach. I found students were really empowered when they realized it was really in their control, which is often not taught in the classical setting. It's very much like structure, hit the structure. But when you bring it down to the breathing, and you show this is your whole body, like you have complete control over this. The students would have breakthroughs left and right. Like their pitch would get better. Their confidence grew, and it's just a mindset tweak,
Well, it's interesting you connected it earlier to the fitness piece too, because like running, I've done endurance sports, those kind of things where it's like you have to think of every little part of your body and how it's moving, because when you get to mile 20, you get to mile 20, 5, 28, 29, it's like all that stuff comes into play all of a sudden. And it's like CrossFit, I'm assuming you're doing, the cleans and those kind of things. It's like the body mechanics of that are so important, every little piece, and singing really is that same thing. And when you start learning how to connect your brain to those things, the whole world opens up.
Yeah, I think so. I've always been like moderately active. I wouldn't say committed to a sport. I did Orange Theory for a while. I love to do like light weights, but I ran it. Interesting. In high school, I ran an 800 in 2:45, which is fast.
Nice.
And I had never trained. And I didn't understand.
There was some kid who hated you. She was like, I've been working my ass off. And you're like, I just do this. What's up?
Nobody told me it was good.
Nobody did?
No.
That's
so
wild.
I just quit after one season. And
That's crazy.
I didn't pursue. And
you could have been in the Olympics, who knows?
Oh, I would probably got that. I'm too short. But my legs just don't have that speed that you get, but they have, but I started running again, and moderate distances, because I wanted to do a sprint try.
Yeah.
Have you ever done a triathlon?
Yeah. That's what my endurance training. I did a half Ironman. I did an ultra marathon, and then I was training for California full Ironman. And
wow.
I went through the entire process, and I got COVID 3 weeks out. Because I was on a 3-hour bike ride for training, and I just laid on the side of the road, and I was like, something's wrong. And I was just laying there staring, and I knew my body very well at that point. And I was like, this is not exhaustion. This is different. And I was fucked. And my coach, I called her, and she's like, yeah, she had several of her clients. I almost said students, but several of her clients get COVID before going in. She's like, please do not try to go in 3 weeks because the heart issues. But yeah, the sprint try is where I started, and I got hooked. So, but yeah. Now, did I started talking about that, and did you say you're getting ready to do one, or that's where you had done one already?
No. So, okay. So circling back to the mental fitness and the running, I just started to realize I wasn't fitness, entrepreneurship, music.
Right.
My goals weren't aligning. I wasn't finding the points where my discipline and my time management and my focus was in sync, and I was achieving what I wanted to achieve.
Mm,
and I knew that it was coming down to how I was operating in my head, right? So, and when I was at Orange Theory, while it's a great program, you can't achieve goals. You can't. There's something really satisfying when you're focusing on a sprint try and you're going to go do this and you have an end
I
date
see.
and
Yeah.
you commit to it, And then I was like, I love to weightlift. Let me give this CrossFit thing a try. And I fell in love with it. And I just, the culture, the community is great. There are a lot of misconceptions because it's been around a long time, but if you, I'm a diehard CrossFit fan. Like, whatever you want to do, you need to do CrossFit because they will modify, coach you through, and you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And that's, you can go to a personal trainer. It's hit or miss how great they are sometimes and how committed they really are to what you're doing. CrossFit, like where I'm at CrossFit Rife, they will not let you, because you're going to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
And that's, if you weightlift without coaching or you overtrain, which I got an injury, so I can't run right now, which is really sad. But
I ruptured 2 discs doing, but see, I overtrained. I was pushing it too hard. It's kind of my MO. And I think I did 5 CrossFit workouts in a week and then did like 2 trail runs. And then I went to do box jumps for like the 6th workout of the week and I ruptured 2 discs. But I mean, yeah, I just pushed it too hard. So yeah. Back to you though. Back to your story.
Hey, I did this workout. It was a hard one. It was 50 deadlifts at 155 pounds, which I did.
Wild.
I was fine with the deadlifts and rope climbs and skis, and I like 2 rope climbs away from RXing that workout. I was like so mad. But then I went to run and I had a weighted vest and I was on the what do you call those? The runners that have the belts. I forget right now.
I'm not sure.
The air runners. And I went to sprint and I tore my freaking leg muscle and it's been like 8 weeks and I ran my first mile like a week ago and I had to stop and I can't put weight on that leg. But the lesson is I have to strengthen everywhere else I'm weaker. My left dominant side and all of my arms. So
that's true. There's a, oh my God, what is this guy's? Yeah, it was terrible. I literally had to crawl into my house on the floor. My boys were younger and they were just making fun of me. They thought it was the funniest thing in the world. We're kind of that family. They give each other shit. We give each other shit. It's fun. But oh man, I forgot where I was going with that. Oh yeah. Josh Waitkins, I believe. He's the guy they made Searching for Bobby Fischer about. He's like a chess guy. But he got into competitive Tai Chi or something like that. I don't know what it is. But anyways, he hurt his arm to where he couldn't train it. And he had talked about where he would go to the gym and train the side that wasn't injured. And like, so if he did 8 reps there, he would pause and then do 8 reps in his mind with the arm that he couldn't train. And I thought it was a very interesting concept. He's a very, out there kind of brilliant dude. But he said when he finally could start training again, he felt like his recovery was quicker. Now it's so anecdotal, but it did make me wonder, like, is there something to it with like the mind body connection in that? So I don't know if that helps you, but that was an interesting concept to me.
That is, and I've thought about that because a lot of times now I have movement, so I'm actually able to move through it. Okay. But yeah, and I don't know. But I get, one of the coaches said that she gets grumpy if she doesn't do her workouts, and yeah,
I feel that.
I get grumpy if I don't do my workouts. It's like, but it is a little frustrating not to be able to lift like I was lifting because that's like one of the ways I cope with stress. So if I can't throw weights around, luckily I've been able to do like sled drags. I love sled drags, where you're just like yank that. I'm like, sled drag. I think I had to pull it. I was like, yeah. Whatever.
No, I feel you. There's days I go in the gym. It's like I'm here to fight. Let's go. I don't do the CrossFit workouts. There's some concepts I definitely apply to what I do now. I do more like mobility and like endurance training type stuff now. But but yeah, there's days where I'm just like, I texted my wife one day. I was like, I'm so like intense right now. Like, I was like, I swear I wanted to get in a fight with someone at the gym. I was like, she's like, you're insane.
Yeah. So that's a good sign for, competitiveness, and, just scientifically, that's a good sign. It means you're in good health.
Yeah. And maybe too much of the pre-workout that particular day, because I was like gunning. Now you had mentioned, so this, and it's, sorry, my brain's thinking like 5 different things at the same time. So you mentioned this connection, right, of figuring out the goals in your life with music, the goals of entrepreneurship, the goals with fitness, all that. You're a mom, trying to figure all those things out and getting your mind right, it sounded like, to get everything aligned. Now that is a thing I feel like, in my perspective, like my wife and I run a commercial cleaning company. I lead a band. I'm also a solo artist. I, going into lights, doing all these levels, 4 kids, blah, blah, blah. But it's like a constant battle to figure that out, for me. And it's like this moving parts in my Google Calendar and trying to figure out the right pieces. What are there maybe 1 or 2 things that you feel like you've landed on that's helped give you sanity in the midst of all that, keep it on the right track?
That's the other thing CrossFit really helped me with, was prioritization. It is a priority. Mm-hmm. I do not, my faith and, my health, if I don't have those 2 things, I can't achieve anything else that I want to do to the capacity that I want to do it. As individuals, especially business owners, and I can tell you're a driven person, you spend a lot of time, it's non-negotiable for me now, and it's okay to have non-negotiables. And for whatever you've been through in your life, especially as women and parents, because I'm a single mom, and because, women tend to be the caretakers in the family. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but it's just a part of our cultural understanding that you can't prioritize these things. And I just, fuck that. Yes, I can, and I will. And it used to be a big part of our people not exercising is a very new thing. Like, that is not historically how life has ever been. So I would link it to failure of most people's lives. And it helped me methodically get through the rest of my day. Mm-hmm. Helped me, it's great for your brain. Things just make sense when you declutter, whatever that process is. It's different for everybody. The exertion's great for your brain, and it's great for your body. And then everything else just kind of, it's easier to prioritize. I think practice of healthy habits and healthy prioritization affect the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like, in a way, is like a linchpin for you, like that, or a cornerstone of that fitness piece became a cornerstone that opens up your priorities elsewhere. Is that a good way to say it?
And it's a pressure valve.
Yeah. I love that.
Like, I can go a lot longer working. 14 to 16-hour days are not uncommon for me, and that's fine for me. I don't need as much. No, sometimes I hit a wall and I need to take a day or 2 off, and I take those days. And I sleep. Some people will mix their sleep. I don't usually do that, unless I really, really have to. And it just makes me better at everything, that I have to do. I wouldn't say I'm excellent at anything, but I would say that, with all the pieces that I've got to juggle, I'm able to give my best if I'm able to do those things.
Right. Now, the entrepreneur end for you, I think, if I understand correctly, you have a PR company. Is that correct?
I have a marketing and PR company. Okay. We're kind of different in the sense that we do strategic development.
Okay. Can you break that down for me?
So,
strategic development in marketing.
Yeah. Well, if done correctly, is supporting every aspect of business, and marketing and sales are not the same thing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times in small business, budget is lower for what you can spend on advertising and I would say advertising, not marketing, and PR. And now there's a merge, and you probably see this in music where, a lot of it's pay to play because it's all business.
Yeah.
Right. So you're either paying somebody to have a relationship with somebody to get an opinion out there, or you just pay to have it published, or you just pay the ads that run the PR campaign for you, right? So there's an intersection there. There is a true level of PR when you're talking about politics and governments and things like that, where people are really having to navigate big crisis communications and things like that. That's not the same. In my opinion, that's way more, that's the heart of real public relations, because you're managing public perception and you have to. PR in business is a little different. You're positioning your brand, which is
in that end.
Positioning your brand. Yep. So I specialize in working with people to develop strategic plans that save their money and elevate their brand so that they can make more money, and then help them prioritize where to put that budget, and sometimes work with small businesses to actually implement systems in-house that will strengthen them and save them money in the long term. So we document processes. We talk about keeping the brand cohesive, because you see a lot of fragmented brands in small businesses, and they're making good money. They're making, higher 6 figures or 7 and even 8 figures, and they don't have cohesive branding because they've always pinched pennies, or they lost money making a marketing decision that didn't bring direct return. So I work in that field. I also do a lot of just strategic consulting.
Nice.
I've done that my whole life. That's just kind of where in music, when I was starting out, I think if you're a musician, you are entrepreneurial.
I think you have to be, especially in this environment. Like if you're not entrepreneurial in this music environment, you're in trouble, or you need to partner with somebody. I do know someone who's like that, just pure artist. And he found himself a manager very early on that's helping guide him that he can trust. But that's always the key too, is there's a lot of people you can't trust too.
There's a lot of talent out there, and I'm just not really, I don't know if you've what your thoughts on this are, but you hit a no bullshit threshold, and you're just like, no.
Down to the point where it's down to the point where I actually have to have, luckily our band functions this way, like this collective brain where we all bring intelligence from different areas of life, where there's some things I've just become so blanket no along the path that sometimes another band member will come along, or I have a business coach as well, where they'll help me say, like, I get why you're saying no, but maybe open yourself to this opportunity, just because there's been so much bullshit. I actually I almost gave up a development deal because I thought somebody was full of shit. But luckily they pushed the issue with me. And I went and researched it. I found out, and so my first band got a development deal out of that, but I literally was like, no, leave us alone. And our first international show, I almost said no to it because it sounded like they were full of shit. But after they pushed it, and then I did more and more research, I was like, oh, okay. But in a way, I almost think you kind of have to have, maybe I'm wrong, you might disagree, but I feel like you almost have to have that boundary and that wall, because there's so many people who want to just take your money and not actually help you in this industry.
I also think, yes. And I mean, so you and I are likely to agree on this point because we're both business owners, right? When you're entrepreneurial and you're starting out, you tend to give a lot, right? Because you have to get started. And in that, you get burned, you make the wrong partnerships, you're going a million miles a minute. And people take advantage of you. And then you lose a lot in time and money, and I think in music, if you run a business, you understand that's the same risk, because music is just another business. But it's closer to your heart, and people are less likely to pay for the value, or the value can be seen kind of squishy.
I like that.
And it almost becomes,
that's a good way.
Squishy.
Good way to describe the value of it.
Well, I mean, they don't, everybody, I just wrote an article about this too, but it was like, nobody values music or in the present moment necessarily until they're crying through a loss. And then they're like, oh shoot, this is why I need this. This is the part. Or And then you find people in different walks of life at different performances where it becomes a space for people to connect and learn more about being human, right? Without all of, I mean, sometimes there's some pushback, but usually in local music settings, you find people who are just there to connect as humans and experience music and learn more about each other
Yeah, it
and
becomes their
themselves.
chosen family. That's a mantra I
Yeah.
hear a lot within, like, I'm in Kansas City, and a lot of the local scene is that idea, their chosen family, and how much it does mean to them. It does seem like in the music industry as well. Well, I'll get to that point, but I did want to put a button on it for anyone listening. Is that even though I have those boundaries, there are people, like a handful of people that along the way, it's like I can name them as like Joyce, Salish, Chad, Chris. Like there's these people that we've earned trust with each other. Where some of
Yeah.
them I've worked with now over a decade. Where it's like when you find those people in this
Oh,
industry, you just hold on to them and you bring all the value you can, because they do exist. It's just you got to be, I guess, discerning is the best way I could think of it.
and it's just like everything else. That's just like
It's true.
anything else. I just think it's the reason it gets more challenging as a musician is because you're fighting for your piece of
Mhm.
it. It is one of the things that seems, like I said, that people don't hold a whole lot of value to, but it's so important. If you don't, I've always said that if you don't have a punk scene, you don't have a vibrant freedom of
Hmm.
speech community. You like the punk scene is such a big part of keeping underground music alive. Nobody makes that correlation, but
Interesting.
I do because it's that rebellious attitude that's always kind of pulsing,
Yeah.
whether you like punk or not. It's just representative of people of people seeking to express themselves, whether you agree with their
Right.
politics or not, and they're out there trying to figure it out. And you really have to have people who are fighting for that space. And that goes through the entire community. And I don't think anybody really attributes, we have the civil rights and the social justice element of music, which
Mhm.
is important. Um, but just the basic freedom of speech element. If we lose the ability to do that.
Well, and I wonder if it's coming more through comedy now, than even like punk music per se. Because what I have noticed,
Yeah.
like, it's like the underbelly, and like the up and coming world of comedy is really about that, pushing the lines of free speech and that piece. And there seems to be a heavy intersection with music and comedy now. And even like as we were touring, realized we started making friends with all these comedians on the road because we found ourselves in so many similar spaces. I don't know. I'm more thinking out loud on that one, but
That's interesting you say that. There's 2 points recently people said to me. One was that if your court jester is in trouble, your freedom's in trouble,
I
right?
like that.
Um, and the other one about entertainment that I heard um, from a guy who's out of entertainment now is like you're competing with a time slot.
Hmm.
You're not competing with popularity, you're competing for the traction for that hour of
Uh,
entertainment and how people are going to spend their ad dollars. And in the business world, that makes a whole lot of sense. I've always navigated the music business in the sense that I've had many conversations with this. I'm sure you have too, about the value of booking agents. Like I could go on and on about that. You get artists who don't want to do that, and like you're kicking yourself in the foot. I'm not saying you need to work with every
right.
agent. You shouldn't, but there's a place and a purpose for them with the venue and the business that's paying you, and also your protection. Like this is not, you don't have to do everywhere, but and then also um the what is the value to the venue that you're coming
Mm-hmm.
into, right? Like if you've got a venue and it costs them $10,000 to stay open, and artists don't
Mm-hmm.
think about this, that's what it is for them to keep their business open on Friday. They have to make $20,000
Right.
that night. Um, you demand X amount of dollars. Why can't you play that room? You can't play that room because
Yeah.
if you don't do that, it's not about anything, but they're like they can't split
Mm-hmm.
it. And I think that it's really important to understand that because we're it's not a connected community. And I think as entrepreneurs, we think about it differently because we know what that risk is. And I don't want that on me. I don't to be successful. I don't want 20 people to not make tips because nobody came.
Because you're running the numbers
realistic,
of the venue and you're like, damn it, I'd hate me right now.
Well, yeah, like it's just about being personally aware and responsible, like what can you pull off? What can you do? And I think that's a conversation musicians really should have, and the managers too. Like they have to understand like the cost of what they're asking.
Well, and I remember trying to break when we first stepped on the scene here in Kansas City. Before all the things that we've had the chance to do, we're just trying to break into our local scene, right? And there was one particular agent that just wouldn't seem to give me the time of day. And I knew he was one of the ones who was doing all these festivals, all this kind of stuff. And then we got our first big thing out of town. And all of a sudden we started like getting attention. He saw me at a club. He knew my name. I was like, oh shit, he knows my name. What's going on? But we still couldn't get booked. And then we did another show, like another big thing out of town. And finally he started he threw us one gig, a smaller gig, and then a bigger gig. And now honestly, I work with him all the time now. And we were sitting there having drinks one night after we had been working together for a few years. And he started unpacking other artists in the scene to me. He's like, man, I love what this person's doing, but they haven't released a new song in 2 years. So I'm just waiting. I'm watching until he releases that new song. And whenever that song comes out, I'm ready. Cause he literally just had so many praises for this person. And he went artist after artist. And I realized that was probably the same conversation he was having about us back in the day, where he's like, he obviously loves what we're doing, but he was waiting till it made sense to protect all of his clients that he works with, and the outcome that he's trying to do. And man, that blew my mind to see that. It was such a great lesson. And now I try to share that to even cause you meet younger artists and they're just pissed off. I was pissed off, and it's like, no, you got to show the value. You got to bring value to this table.
I think that's part of what makes being in the music business hard, especially if you start working in the industry. Because I was doing booking for a while. I still do a little bit of booking, and people want to hate booking agents, just like similar to what you're talking about, and it can smear people's perception of your talent. And I don't know if you've dealt with this, but when you have multiple facets, so like currently I perform and I have a venue where I perform and I do some of their marketing. That we've come a long way in people accepting that people can be multifaceted and do both. But when my immediate opportunity was to help their bottom line, that's what they went with, my marketing and business ability. And for me to be seen musically was way more talented.
It is.
And sometimes it was a double-edged sword, I think now there's a movement for women in general. Men have always, I don't mean this in I'm not a super feminist, but this is very true. Men have ability to like Kevin Bacon just went from, Keanu Reeves, Johnny Depp. They go from being these huge actors to having fans and people just show up and, and do it. And I think there's Kate Hudson started doing this. I don't think she's nearly as successful switching. Is it Kate Hudson? I don't know, but I think it is her.
Seems right. Sounds right.
Yeah. She started and she's great. I was like, oh geez, but then you look at, I can go on and on about that too, because I just get frustrated. There's all this talent out there and, more money, money makes money, and so there it is. And I wouldn't begrudge their transition. I think it's awesome, but it's also, that movement is starting to shift. I don't think she's had nearly the same level of acclaim as the men who've transferred over, who can go get booked. And as a female business owner, I have two sides of the coin. When I talk to musicians and I work with them, they're like, well, why are you in music? They talk about wanting to be famous. I'm like, what is your why? Like, why are you doing this? Well, blah, 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 and their reason's pretty squishy. I was like, that's why you're not fulfilled. I'll tell you my why. My why is people. I still don't have any problem going to a brewery and playing for X amount of dollars because it's about the songs and the people.
Mhm.
I've accepted that. I've struggled with the business side of me, and I've received a lot of criticism for it, because when you run a business or you have to hold boundaries that people don't want you to hold. And when I was coming up and I was strong-minded 25-year-old still booking shows and telling older people what they could and couldn't do, they didn't like that very much. So I ended up dealing with the smear, even though I thought I was being kind, no matter how many people I helped, consulted with, and it was a ton. You're just run over, used, mistreated, talk about. I don't know if that's been your experience. That's the exhausting part of the industry.
Well,
How
and I
people treat each
think
other.
part of it is just that, for lack of a better term, this is going to make me sound like I got crystals everywhere, but I don't. But like the frequency that people are on, and I think there's this lower frequency of like mindset. And I've definitely been in that world, where you think my music's awesome, I'm awesome, so just, everyone should like bow to what I'm doing. But then starting to come up in your thinking, like realizing like I need to, one, value myself, but in that I have to ask myself, what is the value that this brings to the other person? Right. And I think the more and more I'm going, I don't know if it's just because like some of those people I don't gravitate towards, but maybe I think of it as just like, I feel lucky because I feel like a lot of the artists I'm around now have that mindset where the conversation constantly now is how do we provide more value to this client? Like even to the point where we say the word client, but there is a subset that they cringe at that. But it's like in reality, the venue owner, or like we're doing like corporate gigs, private events, festivals, like weddings, like those are clients, and so we have to figure out how do we help them. And then in turn, when we have our original music, we think of it as our fan, like so this piece of content, it's not just about posting a piece of content every day. It's asking, we took a whole day last week and did these 3 circles and found the overlap, the 3 basically machines of our business. And we found this overlap and we're like, okay, where it overlaps in these 3 things, every piece of content needs to be communicating that and finding a way to connect to the fan. And I think that's the piece that I didn't get in the beginning. So many people don't, but luckily, and strangely, I feel like the younger and younger artists I meet, they're actually more on board with that than some of the people my age, because I think a lot of people, I'm 44. So a lot of people my age are still in that like 90s mentality of like, oh, it's just music. I'm too cool to promote my shit. Where like some of the 20-year-olds I'm meeting in the scene, they're like, hell yeah, tell me about that. Like, let's do that. Who's the agent? Who like they get promotion because I think they just live in it. But yeah.
Yes. I was gonna say that is the very Gen Zeal from TikTok and social media. Like people are just used to being out there promoting themselves in general. So I don't think that concept is new. But also the music industry is relatively young compared to other aspects of business.
That's
right?
true. I guess like even recorded
if you
music
think
hasn't
about
been
it,
around just yeah.
not even a century.
That is wild to think about.
Yeah. I mean, maybe a century. Yeah, maybe a century. I think the first recordings were like in the teens, right? So maybe just over 100 years. And you think about how far that's come, and how much it's evolved and the oppression that people have really navigated. I mean, music is an industry. It never was supposed to be an industry.
In what way? What do you mean by that?
I took Ellie, my daughter, to see the Monet and Van Gogh.
I saw a video
real life.
on your feed.
Have you seen that?
That looked cool.
Yeah. Well, but Van Gogh, he spent his life poor. And here are people making millions off of his artwork, right? And he didn't paint for the industry, Even when you look at the famous historians in life, I mean, there have always been artists that, the bourgeoisie or whatever, sponsored or covered or whatever you call it, patroned. But it is, and there's been crafts and artisanship. I guess there was, thinking through classical. But if you're looking at roots music in the history, like you're really talking about people who just, music was how they unwound from the day. It's how they connected with people. It's how they expressed their faith. In the classical setting, people did pay to see tickets. So I guess they're, Shakespeare and things like that, there's a history there. But in our context, in, people writing original music and sharing that being an industry is.
No, I get what you're saying. Before it was like, if you had a guitar, you were just sitting on the porch after a long day's work and singing songs with the guitar and a banjo. And it was more folk kind of our roots, if you will, back to roots music.
Well, yeah, but it's all roots music. I mean, whether it's electrified or not, it's all coming back to the 1-4-5, and that's a pretty global scale. And I think, I don't know, I think that element of self-expression is really important. It's also more empowered in our culture now, and that's different across different countries. Different people, different countries have different hold different space for that. And our culture holds a lot of space for it. We're really, really, I know if you go to Europe and you play music, they say I've never done that. So I hear that the audiences are way more receptive. They listen. Here in the US, you can do a tour and make a living if you're doing solo. That's pretty cool. You can't do that everywhere, not without having a certain amount of stature and being able to fill a certain amount of rooms. I just think that's really an incredible mark of the industry.
Well, and I do think, even though there are a lot of negative parts of what's happened in the industry, I think all in all, there's way more opportunity in this current climate than there was before. But I think you have to have that. What's that?
Why do you think that? Why do you think
well,
that?
Basically, like when you even look at Spotify, where people are so mad at Spotify, and I get it. I have like one of our producers won't even touch Spotify. He's like, I know you guys got to use it, but he's like, fuck Spotify. But it gives this opportunity to be heard, around the world that just didn't exist before. When you look at the internet, or we look at this, like we can do a podcast as part of the band. And what city are you in? In
Norfolk, Virginia.
Norfolk. How do you say it?
Norfolk, Virginia. Norfolk.
Virginia.
Norfolk.
I love it. And connecting like this, where like our keyboardist, he's going to be on the road this weekend. He's flying into Denver and making connections that are, it's like we have these connections across the country, across the world, that are way more easy. That's dumb, but way easier to come about. I think the problem that some people run into is that it just takes a different kind of mindset. You have to have the organizational piece. There's not a bunch of managers running around looking for new bands anymore. There's not the development end of record labels where they're going to spend 5 albums on you to make you into Bruce Springsteen. That part of the industry doesn't exist. But if you're willing to do that for yourself, value yourself, invest in yourself, that the opportunities are there, even if you're just out in the middle of like nowhere.
I think you bring up a really good point with that. So I do believe that if you cultivate the sound, which can be challenging, but to make the splash really does take a deep grassroots connection and money. And so I've seen, and I do think that the bands are doing better because there is power in numbers. So, the groups that have, and I've seen this time and time again, and the band might even it might be mediocre. It doesn't matter because people are having a good time on stage and the people are coming to shows and they're having a good time.
I'm not
familiar. Do you like the Future Birds? Have you heard them? I love the Future Birds. They're a rock band. And I guess they're older now. I just discovered them about a year ago. And they're just they're like your quintessential rock band, and they're on the festival circuit. And they have a really deep loyalty group, just like Keller Williams does. And he was in the band. I don't know. It's really, I could go down a sociological and anthropological debate about that, but
well,
I think it's really cool.
That is the reality. Like there are people that I follow that they have just created. There's a rapper named Echo. I actually met him one night. Are you familiar with him? And so my wife and I were
Yeah.
out on a date night or on the border here in Kansas City. And this is a decade ago, probably. And we get to chatting up. The waiter, he's super nice. He's like bringing out, I like peppers. So he brought me out a bunch of like fresh peppers. We started talking about music. He's like, hey, I'm a rapper. I'm like, okay, because unfortunately you meet rappers sometimes and it's not, just like when my wife says to her coworkers, oh, my husband's in a band. They're like, oh God. And so she's like, I have
Yes.
to explain, like, no, he's in like, they're doing real shit kind of thing. And so I was like, cool, I'll check you out. I followed him. And I never even really listened to music, to be fully honest. I just followed him. And then I started watching him grow. And next thing you know, he's like show after show after show. And then he's like headlining in Vegas. And then he's on a thing with Tech Nine, which is one of the biggest rappers like in the world. And I'm like, this dude. But what's been amazing following his career is he's done an incredible job of fostering this community that I think they feel he's given directly to them and they're trying to give back to him. And it's really cool to see. And I think that's the key where like not everyone knows who he is. He's not Katy Perry by any means, but my God, he is killing it. And I imagine at this point making a living, So
Yeah, it's funny. I've heard of
what's
him.
that?
I said it's funny. I've heard of him
So
because I have heard of
talented.
him. That's
But again,
interesting.
and anyone I see doing that, like doing well, I know a country band right now that's getting paid anywhere between $10,000 to $30,000 a show. And no one, like if I said their name, most people wouldn't know who they are, but they have just fostered this community in the red dirt scene that they're just killing it. And I'm like, wow, it's inspiring. I think that maybe that's one key component is like figuring out your community and investing in them. I mean, I'm sure I'm not saying anything
Yeah.
groundbreaking. I'm more just like, oh yeah.
I
Right.
mean, but that's business. I think it's a little different in music though, because you have to be okay. You have to foster the community. You're still the center of attention. So that's, like people are there to watch you on stage and then you have to navigate, different levels of interest and enthusiasm. And that can be challenging. So I definitely agree. But that circling back into that, that is why doing business and being a performer can be challenging. Because you can create different ripples in the community. And without really meaning to, and you don't really have control over what people think, and you want to believe that your character is always going to override whatever happens there, but I don't think it always necessarily does, because the truth doesn't come out till later. I think you just kind of land on, I don't know, you said you run a cleaning business with your wife. Okay. And that's maybe when you're separated, it's easier, right? Like I can run the marketing PR agency. It doesn't have anything to do with the music. And I can have the good and hard conversations and then kind of keep music a little separated. But when you start actually doing business in the music industry and you're trying to help people, like you have to be really clear. I've learned to be really clear on the offers, the boundaries, what I can and can't do. And also just talk about the challenges of it and be like, look, this is hard. I'm an artist. I also do this. I hope artist to artist, we can help each other out and you understand what I'm doing. And then but that took me a while to figure out how to talk about it, so that you can maintain the community. And it's also so cool because the music community is still at large. If Echo and his community are super loving and welcoming, when they encounter other artists, they're likely to be more welcoming. Like there's a chance they're going to be more understanding of accepting other artists because they've had a positive experience to that, That's the cool thing about music.
You can see that too. As he partners with people doing content, that you can tell there's people who are jumping into, are like, basically they're sharing streams, I'm sure, like in that sense, not like literal streams, like Spotify streams, but like their communities, I think, are coming together and merging really well. But yeah, there was, unfortunately time's running short for me, but there was something you had kind of hit on earlier and you're talking about, women in the industry. And so like I was like the ignorant guy going into the industry as well, thinking everything, life's the same for everybody. We had a friend of ours, her name's Crystal. She had asked, because we were doing like going heavy in this whole social media game, and she's like, she wanted to have a meeting and pick our brains. And we told her like all the strategies we're working on, which at the time messaging was like heavy strategy, like reaching out to people, connecting them. And she just kind of like stared at us and she's like, you have no idea what it's like to be a woman in this industry, do you? I'm like, we're both dudes. We looked at each other, we're like, no, like, tell us. And she kind of broke down like the messages she gets, and like I have another friend, Jessica, who she tours and does all that. And she regularly, like once, if not twice a week, will post like, this is what was said to me after my, my show. And it's just realizing her experience is so different than mine in there. What are some challenges that you've seen working as a woman, like in entrepreneurship and then also music kind of merged together?
I will say sending direct messages for people to come to my show, unless I know them personally, is not an option as a woman. Why would I do that? That's it can send the wrong message, quickly misunderstood. So that's touching on probably one of the primary ones. I'm an extroverted, outgoing woman. I run a business and I'm a musician. That is constantly misunderstood in the faces. It's constantly criticized. Though I will say with the movement of women becoming more vocal about their business ownership, that's getting better. Another challenge is women supporting women. It has always been a thing. So if you are performing at a venue, and this could get some controversy, but if you're performing at a venue and a husband and a wife, whatever their state of their relationship is, but a boyfriend, girlfriend, doesn't matter. If that woman does not like that her boyfriend is even listening to another woman, they're gone. And if there could be a sideways glance that, there's just this person on stage. And unless that girl or woman is completely confident in who she is in their relationship, or she's not going to stick around, and part of those, that's going to go. And it doesn't matter if you're seen it happen. It happened a lot more when I was younger. Now it's changing because there are more female musicians out there. And I think also, like you said, Gen Z, they're out there promoting. There's like a little more confidence there. But, it's just generational battle after generational battle of women not, criticism for what you're wearing, criticism for like that you're, quote, self-promoting and you must be,
right.
You have to self-promote. You have to. It doesn't mean that I'm like a narcissist. It just means that if I want to be successful in this industry, I have to talk about what I'm doing, and then again, doing my best to manage perceptions. And of course, there's always a level of inappropriateness that comes with being a female musician. I know men deal with it too. Men just might be a little more receptive to that kind of.
That's another friend of mine,
presentation.
KJ. She's talked about that, where it's like if a girl hits on a guy at a bar or out in a parking lot after a show, that guy doesn't feel threatened. Where if you flip that script, it's just already like this threatening scenario. Like if I say no, if I refuse this advance, am I in trouble? All these kind of things that, again, guys don't think about. But it's interesting, that perspective too, of like, it sounds like some of the struggle is just even a woman to a woman in supporting each other.
And there's a lot of stereotyping that happens, like what you do, what your life is, what your character might be, what your, sexual orientation might be. Like if you're a strong woman, and people might make assumptions about, and I'm straight, but I've had people think that just because I was confident in a musician, that I was gay. I don't care what you think, and I don't have a problem with that lifestyle, but I'm not. And you just place this on me because of your perceptions about one, the homosexual community, which is not fair, and me, when you don't even know me. So, that's just an example of, that's just an an example of what goes on in people's minds, but that's also the risk you take as a musician. Anytime you go out there and you're expressing yourself and you're singing on your own 2 feet, like everyone's cultural perceptions and their ideas of you, that is on them. And I can be as clear as I want to be and let my songs speak for themselves. I think it's a constant evolution of how we best communicate. You know, like I just found CrossFit and it changed my life. I wish that I had found it. I mean, I tried it a decade ago. It wasn't the same program, but it gave me so much clarity around how to navigate this and what matters and what doesn't matter in music, which brings everything else full circle. Because when you're in the gym and you're able to work that crap out and you don't really care, it's all up to you what you're doing. Like nobody can help you. Nobody can fix your fitness or build your mental endurance. You're focusing on that. All of this other stuff just kind of fluffs out. So those are challenges that I have, but cultivating something within my mind and body that provides me stability, I can't explain. Maybe you understand. Like I can't explain what that does for managing the rest of those challenges.
I feel that there's many during the height of like my endurance training. It was like a 2.5 year period where I was doing, progressive races throughout to build up to that Ironman. And then the world came back alive and the music industry started again. So I didn't have time anymore because one day I still want to do that full Ironman. Anyways, I remember many days like being out there like, why the fuck are you doing this? And I remember one time just realizing is like I was on a mission to find like something I had lost. And I had this sense that I had to keep going to find it. And when I did find it, like even to the point, during one of my races, I almost died. I was in the hospital. I got rhabdomyolysis. It was a 30-mile race, and my body basically rhabdo. Are you familiar with that? It's where your muscles. It was again over exertion, and your muscles begin to break down and bleed out. My kidneys were shutting down, all that kind of stuff. But like going through that whole process, even that I'm grateful for because it's like all of it gave me so much more clarity to where now to this day, even though I'm not running those kind of distance anymore, just because I don't have the time, I'm applying it now in like my marriage. I'm applying it with my boys. I'm applying it in the business, with the music, with leading the guys in my band, like all those pieces, the things I found on that journey and to this day still working out, I think do apply there. So yeah, I feel you 100%. Like it, and it's that tenacity, like it's just like it says non-negotiable, and it gives you kind of a grit in a way, which I wonder if this piece for you, even when you're talking about as a woman standing up there or as like an artist trying to communicate your own unique thoughts, no matter if people are going to misunderstand it or not, it's like almost like standing there ready to take it because you're like, I don't give a fuck. Let's go. Let's do this.
There's a big element of the grit. I don't give a fuck.
Right.
And still really caring about people. That's probably like the perfect way to conclude everything we've talked about. Is it's something happens within you, and some of it's time, some of it's experience, some of it's age. I'm 38, and you just hit this point where you've been through so many parts of who you are and who you were trying to be that wasn't true to who you are or who you want to be. And it's like, you know what? This is the core of who I am, and I can work on my behavior and I can work on my communication. But there's still things within me that are only going to change if I want them to, or become better if I do this thing. And how I present here, all I can do is the best I can do. And the two are so intricately linked for me. I don't know if that's true for you, but when I figured that out, that it was okay for me that those things were true. There was a core part of who I was that I could work through habitual change in fitness and music, whatever. And then my presentation to everyone else, I could navigate because that inner part of me was settled. And so and it's a very osmotic experience, but I just, and know, is one of the most healing things. And then you just get to the point too where you don't even have to fight. You just have this like internal resilience of this is what I got right here and right now. Like I have this presence of mind and I'm going to share it. And if you know, and it does feel like it's you against the world sometimes. And then you like look back at it and you're like,
my business coach,
what
he
is
refers
reality?
to it as
You know?
relaxed intensity. He's like, it's like as this goal of like being so settled. It's like there's not this anxiety, but there's an intensity. And he's like, and to me, that phrase always comes back to me. I'm like, yeah, whenever I find those places, it's usually because I finally settled some shit, you know?
So you don't quit your rock band, and girls, don't quit your rock band, and make sure you're working
last
out.
2 questions. We probably covered all this, so maybe it's just putting in there, but off of the podcast, the Live and Create. So last 2 quick questions, and like more soundbite-ish, even if you want to. Right now, how would you define living a great life?
Authentically and honestly. Yep. Just, yeah. I think authentically and honestly. For me, that's being a mom, doing, pursuing fitness and excellence in my businesses, and music is a part of those businesses. And then also not making excuses anymore. Like that's a really big, it's okay to table things, but really be honest with myself. Am I making an excuse right now? Is this a priority? And, or is this an excuse? And really being honest about yourself, with myself about that. And in faith, my faith's a big part of my life. But
and then the last question, right now, how would you define creating great things?
I think it's defined. I don't think greatness is defined. I think it's built and preserved through resilience.
I think that's a great way to end. Yeah. Thanks for making the time. That's awesome. Thank you for listening to the Live and Create podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure you subscribe and leave a comment or a review.
The Live and Create podcast.